The truth is, the current push to develop artificial intelligence is a direct rebellion against the limits God placed on our civilization thousands of years ago, at the Tower of Babel. He meant what he said when he said it, and he has just been waiting patiently for us to get to this moment in time so that he can bring the current age to its designated end. The content in this video is going to reveal why AI development is mankind's final effort to snap the shackles God placed on us at the very beginning. How God placed the ultimate limitation on human technological advancement at the Tower of Babel. What Genesis 11:6 reveals about God's perspective regarding our technological ambitions. Why the nuclear fire described in the prophets and the book of Revelation is God's response to our AI rebellion. After more than 50 years spent translating and studying the prophetic texts in the Bible, the author of this article is finally able to explain the direct connection between the AI revolution and the second coming that the prophets and apostles understood, early church leaders lost, and religious leaders today completely overlook. The global rush toward artificial intelligence, a digital currency, and the mark of the beast, is accelerating rapidly, pushing civilization toward the nuclear holocaust at the very end of the age, just as the prophets and apostles predicted it would. For that reason, an accurate understanding of how God views AI technology isn't just interesting, it's essential for anyone who wants to avoid being caught up in mankind's greatest act of rebellion. And now, to the task at hand. Rather than telling you outright how God views mankind's push to develop artificially intelligent computers, I need to show you a few things first so that those who gain insight from what I tell you can understand the circumstances we face here at the end of this age. That way, those who choose not to believe I know what I am talking about, may be less likely to do something the living God will make them regret, for all eternity. Listen to what the psalmist says about the mindset of the political, religious, and business leaders of this, the final generation on planet Earth. Psalm 2, verses 1 through 12, my interim translation. Why are Gentiles conspiring together, and kinfolk cooing over emptiness? The kings of earth will position themselves, and authorities will be founded together against his majesty, even against his anointed one. Let's snap their shackles and toss their cords from us. One who sits in the sea of waters will laugh. My master will jeer at them. At that time, he will speak to them in his anger, and he will frighten them with his burning. But I have already poured out my king as a cast image on Zion, the mountain of my holiness. I will recount concerning the statute of his majesty. He said to me, You are my son, I engendered you today. Ask of me, and I will give Gentiles as your inheritance, the ends of earth as your inheritable property. You will break them with an iron staff. You will pulverize them like a thing that is being formed. So now, O kings, gain insight, accept admonishment, O judges of earth. Work for his majesty in fear, and be happy with shudders. Kiss the Son, lest he becomes angry and you go the way to hell, because his anger will burn for a little while. Those who attain the resurrection are all who take refuge in him. The first thing you need to know about that psalm is what the psalmist had in mind when he described the dim-witted activities of the influential leaders of this final generation. Psalm 2, verse 3, my interim translation. Let's snap their shackles and toss their cords from us. I'm not going to point out all the ways in which powerful people are, to this very day, trying to circumvent the restraints God has placed on us. I'm only going to show you the first few, what God said to Adam and Eve, right before he booted them out of the garden and sent them down here to live, that is, exist for a short while, in the realm of the dead. Genesis chapter 3, verses 16 through 19, my interim translation. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pain and your childbearing. You will engender sons in pain, and your longing will be for your man, but he will have authority over you. But to the Adam he said, because you listened to the voice of your woman, and you ate from the tree that I commanded you, saying, you cannot eat from it, the ground is irrevocably cursed on account of you, you will eat it in pain all the days of your life. And she will sprout weeds and various kinds of thistles for you, but you must eat the vegetation of the field. You must eat bread obtained by the sweat of your nose until you return to the ground, because you were taken from it, because you are dust, and you will return to dust. If you read that passage carefully, you should be able to see God imposed several restraints on those two renegades and their descendants, that is, down to this final generation. Take another look at the first one. Genesis chapter 3, verse 16a, my interim translation. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pain and your childbearing. You will engender sons in pain. I have long since explained why God imposed that particular curse on the woman. It was because the prepubescent girl she had been, suddenly began to age, that is, die, just as God had warned her she would. As a result, she became sexually mature and able to have children, which is not what God had planned for the two of them. Therefore, the punishment fit the crime simply because God never intended for you and me to be here. But that is not what I want you to consider. This is. If God imposed a punishment of excruciating pain during childbirth on all women to remind them of what happened when Adam and Eve chose to disobey God, how do you suppose that same God might feel now that some of the more intelligent members of our species have crafted a couple of ways to avoid the punishment he imposed? To my way of thinking, that would seem to be precisely what an epidural and a cesarean section are intended to accomplish, not to mention painkillers of all kinds. In telling you what I have just told you, I am in no way suggesting anyone should reject the comfort provided by the various painkillers that are available today, especially those related to the pain of childbirth. I am merely pointing out a few instances in which mankind has obviously refused to accept the limits the angry, jealous God of the Old Testament imposed on us for his own specific purposes. It will be just as obvious when the time comes for us to suffer the consequences of our ill-advised behavior. Until then, just keep in the forefront of your mind the way the psalmist describes the Almighty God's reaction to all the ways we have been trying to escape the shackles he placed on us. Psalm 2, verses 4 and 5, my interim translation. One who sits in the sea of waters will laugh. My master will jeer at them. At that time, he will speak to them in his anger, and he will frighten them with his burning. If you have read the things I have written about the impending nuclear holocaust, you should already know what the psalmist is referring to when he says his burning. If you don't, it is only because you have already chosen to believe God did not call me to warn you. But enough about that, take a look at the second shackle God placed on the woman. This one is even more insidious than the first. Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. My interim translation. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pain and your childbearing. You will engender sons in pain, and your longing will be for your man, but he will have authority over you. I realize that what I am going to tell you now will be vehemently, vociferously, and virulently rejected by nearly everyone who hears what I am going to say, but especially by those who are fervid in their rejection of any consideration at all, of the possibility that there might be an all-powerful God who is going to hold every last one of us accountable for what we choose to believe. Nevertheless, I am going to tell you bluntly that God imposed an even more insidious curse on Eve because her disobedience resulted in her beginning to die, that is, to age and become sexually mature as soon as she chose to believe Satan's lie. So in this case also, the punishment fits the crime, but the tragedy is, it falls on every female who chooses to become one flesh with a man by engaging in sexual intercourse with him. The curse that God imposed on Eve has had an amazingly disastrous impact on the relationship between a man and woman who have become one flesh. That is because the curse on the woman is psychological, and it can only be overcome by the woman accepting the fact that God has granted the man the right to decide what should and should not be the terms of their relationship. So how do you suppose both men and women have tried to circumvent God's imposition on their search for true happiness? Never fear, the truth lies right here, in what the Apostle Paul says in this passage. Romans chapter 1, verses 15 through 28. HSSB. So as for me, I am also eager to proclaim the good news of the fulfillment of the promise to you who are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the good news of the fulfillment of the promise, for it is God's supernatural power for salvation in anyone who believes God's promise, in both Jew, first, and Greek, for God's declaration of not guilty is being revealed by it, on the basis of his belief in God's promise resulting in our belief in God's promise, just as it has been written, and then the one who is blameless will live on the basis of belief in God's promise. For God's anger is going to be revealed from heaven against all the depravity and injustice of men who hold the truth fast in injustice, because what is known about the living God is well known within them, for the living God has made it well known to them. For since the creation of the world his invisible characteristics, both his everlasting supernatural power and divine nature, which are understood by the things he made, have been plainly seen so that they are without excuse. Because, when they knew the living God, they did not glorify him as God or give thanks, but became futile in their speculations, and their heart, lacking insight, was darkened. Alleging that they were wise, they became stupid and exchanged the glory of the imperishable God, for the likeness of an image of a perishable man and of winged creatures and of quadrupeds and of reptiles. Wherefore, the living God handed them over to uncleanness through the selfish desires of their hearts, so that their bodies would be dishonored by them, those who exchanged the truth of the living God for the lie and were in awe of it and served the creation as priest rather than the one who created it, the one who is going to be blessed for the ages to come, without doubt. For this reason the living God handed them over to an urge for dishonor, for their females as well exchanged their natural use for the one that is contrary to nature, and then the males likewise, after letting go of the natural use of the female, were also set afire in their craving for one another, males and males bringing about their unseemly behavior and getting back within themselves the requital that has to do with their deception. And just as they did not approve of the living God, to hold on to approval through full knowledge of the truth, the living God handed them over to a rejected mind, to do the things that are not right. Since it can be expected that some numbskull will stupidly accuse me of homophobia, simply because I believe what Paul wrote about what the angry jealous God of Israel did at the Tower of Babel, let me set the record straight here. I have nothing against gay people. To my mind, they are no different than anyone else in this hellhole in which we exist. Everyone is doing what they deem best to deal with their circumstances. Over my rather long life, I have known several gay people, and I considered them all to be my friends. I roomed with one while in college, attended my niece's marriage to another woman, and even hired one who worked for me until he died. My view of my situation is, I have no right to judge anyone for how they choose to live their life, but I am certainly responsible for how I choose to live mine. So I have chosen to refrain from the heterosexual one-night stand lifestyle, but that does not give me the right to judge those who do. The only point I am making here has to do with the ways in which mankind has worked to circumvent the shackles God has placed on us. Therefore, since I have shown you the two shackles he placed directly on women, let me show you the one he indirectly placed on the man Adam. Genesis chapter 3, verses 17 through 19, my interim translation. But to the Adam he said, because you listened to the voice of your woman, and you ate from the tree that I commanded you, saying, you cannot eat from it. The ground is irrevocably cursed on account of you. You will eat it in pain all the days of your life. And she will sprout weeds and various kinds of thistles for you, but you must eat the vegetation of the field. You must eat bread obtained by the sweat of your nose until you return to the ground, because you were taken from it, because you are dust, and you will return to dust. That passage describes three distinctly different facets of the curse that God placed on the ground, with the definite intent that all three would remain a ball and chain on the efforts of Adam and any future descendants, to eke out a living from an extremely recalcitrant ground. 1. Weeds. 2. Physical work, sweat. 3. Death. For the benefit of those who have just crawled out from under a rock, the herbicide 2,4-D has been used for the last 80 years or so to remove the first of those two shackles. More recently, another herbicide commonly called Roundup has contributed to the rise of an agricultural practice known as no-till farming. So much for the sweat of the nose sort of thinking. The farmers who follow this method not only save money but also work less. And those who are able to get their hands on a $500,000 robotic tractor can even sit in an air-conditioned office all day, never once suffering under the shackle of the curse that God imposed on Adam. Think about that for a while, then think utopia, because that is where the rich and powerful in our day are hell-bent on taking us. The only problem they face is, God has been right here at the end of the age, just waiting for them to arrive, for at least the last 4,000 years, patiently waiting for this civilization to come to a time when its leaders firmly believe they can, once and for all, remove the shackles God has placed on us. Some are, at this moment, trying to eliminate the shackle of death. Bad move. When utopian becomes dystopian. The communists, who avidly hold as their sole, single, solitary theological tenet the completely unprovable belief that there is no God, have long held an equally firm commitment to creating a utopia here on planet Earth in which everyone shares equally in its great bounty. In 1848, the magnificent theological wizards Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels pulled that rabbit out of thin air and created a fantastic fantasy, ex nihilo. Never mind the fact that what they envisioned is based more on some universal usufruct rather than good old-fashioned logic and common sense. Just don't try using that approach with an avowed communist. None of them have any of either, and therein lies the rub. You see, over the past 2 centuries, the John Darby dispensationalists in the fundamentalist wing of the Christian Church have been used by Satan to convince the more religious folk among us that Jesus Christ will return, rebuild the temple for the Jews, and establish an eternal kingdom here on earth. And in that, we find the opposite and equally opposing force needed to create a humongous rub. Therefore, you had better get ready for it, because it is coming, fast. But, since I have already explained all this in the little bits and pieces I have given you over the past 35 years, and then want to hear a whopper, I'll move on. The truth regarding our current circumstances begins with an acceptance of the fact that the person called Satan really does exist. You find him mentioned for the first time in Genesis 3, where he tells Eve a bald-faced lie and thereby ensures that all the rest of us end up here in the realm of the dead, doing our best to navigate the twists and turns of a life in which lies and liars are the norm, and absolute truth is hard to come by. Those who are the more deceptive among us thrive in this chaotic environment, but those who take other folks at face value, Not so much. Jesus Christ was one of those who knew what has been going on down here for a very long time now, and he says the following about the fellow we know as Satan. John chapter 8, verses 42 through 44, HSSB. Jesus told them, "If the living God were your Father, you would love me, for I came out of the living God, and I have come, for I did not even come of my own accord, but that individual sent me. Why do you not know what I said? Because you cannot hear the word that I have. You are part of your father, the false accuser, and you want to act in accordance with the selfish desires of your father. That individual has been a killer since the beginning, and he does not stand in the truth, because truth is not in him. Whenever he speaks the lie, he is speaking on the basis of his own thoughts, because he is a liar and the father of it." There you have it. Moses plainly tells us Satan lied to Eve, which resulted in every last one of us living under a sentence of death from the moment we were conceived. And then, in that passage, the Lord tells us Satan is a pathological liar. So take a look at what the Apostle Paul tells us about how Satan spreads his lies. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 10 through 15, HSSB. "The truth of the Anointed One is in me. The fact is that this boasting that is in me will not be shut up in the regions of Achaia. Why? Because I do not love you? The living God knows. So what I am doing I will also do in the future, so that I may cut off the opportunity from those who want an opportunity, to also be found to be just as we are, in whatever they are boasting about. For such men are false apostles, guileful workers who convert themselves into apostles of the Anointed One, and that is not an amazing sight, for Satan himself converts himself into a messenger of light. Therefore, it is nothing tremendous if his servants also convert themselves into something like servants of a declaration of not guilty, whose consummation will be in accordance with their works." Did you hear what the Apostle Paul said? He said Satan already had people working in the apostolic church, pretending to be apostles, within just a few decades after Jesus was crucified. So let's use a wee bit of logic and just a smidgen of reason to see if we can't gain the full significance of what Paul says. First of all, Satan was going around telling his lies before Adam and Eve were booted out of the garden. He was still doing his dastardly deeds when Job came on the scene sometime before Moses. He was definitely working when he entered Judas at the Last Supper and got him to betray Jesus. And now Paul tells us he was working in the church while he was still alive. So what makes you think that fool is not hard at it today? If you have somehow gotten the nonsensical notion that Satan is no longer working through pious, pompous, pin-headed penguins who pose proudly in the pulpit every Sunday, pretending to be a messenger of light, you must have rocks for brains. Satan's agents are assiduously working the church, deceiving anyone and everyone who is willing to use his lies to make themselves feel better about themselves. For that reason, if you are absolutely convinced you don't already believe a monstrous lie, that Satan specifically designed to send you straight to hell, you definitely need to consider what Jesus said when he told his disciples the parable of the tares. Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30, HSSB. He set another comparison before them, saying, "The kingdom of the heavens is like a man who sowed exceptionally good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and oversowed tares in the midst of the wheat and went away. So then, when the grass sprouted and produced fruit, the tares also appeared. So, when the slaves of the owner of the house approached, they said to him, 'Master, did you not sow exceptionally good seed in your field? Therefore, where did the tares it has come from?' So he declared to them, 'An enemy, a man has done this.' So his slaves say to him, 'Therefore, do you want us to go cull them out?' But he declares, No, lest perhaps, while culling the tares out, you might at the same time uproot the wheat with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, first, cull out the tares and bind them into bundles in order to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my storehouse. For the benefit, or detriment, whichever the case may be, of those who can't quite wrap their head around the fact that the church has finally slid off into a full-blown apostasy over the past half-century or so, let me show you what Jesus said to his disciples when he interpreted the parable of the tares for them. Matthew chapter 13, verses 36 through 43, HSSB. At that time, after leaving the crowds, he came into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, "Explain the comparison of the tares of the field in detail for us." So, in response, he said, "The one who sows the exceptionally good seed is the Son of the Man, but the field is the world." And then the exceptionally good seed? These individuals are the sons of the kingdom. And then the tares? They are the sons of the one who is nasty. And then the enemy, the one who sowed them? He is the false accuser. And then the harvest? It is the consummation of the current age. And then the reapers? They are messengers. Therefore, indeed, just as the tares are culled out and burned up in a fire, it will be like this at the consummation of the current age. The Son of the Man will send his messengers, and they will cull all the deadfall traps and those who commit the lawless deed out of his kingdom, and they will throw them into the furnace of the fire. Weeping and gritting of teeth will be there. At that time, those who are blameless will shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let the one who has ears hear. If you still can't see the truth with regard to the apostasy of the church, I pity you. The rest of what I am going to say here will not benefit you at all. But to fulfill my calling, I must tell you what the book of Revelation says about the things to come. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9, HSSB. Then there was war in heaven, Michael and his messengers waging war with the sea serpent. And the sea serpent and his messengers waged war, and they did not have the ability to win, neither was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the sea serpent, the great one, the snake, the ancient one, the one that is called false accuser and Satan, the one who is going to lead the entire civilized world astray, was thrown down. He was thrown down to the earth and his messengers were thrown down with him. The truth is, by lying to just one influential person after another over the past 2,000 years since Jesus died, Satan has finally succeeded in deceiving the entire world. But over the next several years, God fully intends to straighten up the disaster that fool created. Whether or not you benefit from what the Lord does for the redeemed is entirely up to you. But I can tell you this, when everything is said and done, the tares that Satan has planted in the church will have no excuse at all, on Judgment Day. So let me explain what is going to happen just a little ways down the road from here, as we keep heading toward the end of the age, so that you can get a fairly good idea as to exactly how God feels about the artificial intelligence that ignorant, atheistic men are hard at work creating in computers. This is how John the Revelator describes what is going to happen after Satan loses access to the exalted position he has held for far too long. Revelation chapter 12, verses 10 through 17, HSSB. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven, saying, "At this time, the salvation and the supernatural power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his anointed one, have come, because the accuser of our brothers, the one who makes accusations against them day and night before our God, has been thrown down. And they have triumphed over him because of the blood of the little lamb, and because of the word of their testimony, and because they did not love their soul, up to the time of death. For this reason the heavens and you who are camping out in them must celebrate. Woe to the earth and the sea because the false accuser, who has tremendous rage, aware that he has just a little time, has come down to you. Then when the sea serpent saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male. So the 2 wings of the vulture, the great one, were given to the woman, so that she could fly into the desert, to her place, where she is going to be provided food there for a time, and times, and half a time, away from the snake's presence. So the snake cast water out of his mouth like a river behind the woman, so that he might cause her to be carried away by the river. So the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the river that the sea serpent cast out of his mouth. So the sea serpent became angry with the woman and went away to make war with the rest of her seed, those who keep the commandments of the living God, and hold on to the testimony of Jesus, and he stood on the sand of the sea. In a series of articles I wrote a decade or so ago, I explained how that passage relates to things that John explains elsewhere in the book of Revelation, so I am not going to cover those things again here. Suffice it to say, circumstances here on planet Earth are going to get more than a wee bit bonkers when the idiot sea serpent shows up in person. For now, I am going to focus on what John says next. Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 10, HSSB. Then I saw a beast that has 10 horns, and 7 heads, and 10 diadems on its horns, and names of a false religious claim on its heads, coming up out of the sea. And the beast that I saw was just like a leopard, and its feet were like a bear, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And the sea serpent gave it its supernatural power, and its throne, and tremendous authority. And one of its heads was like one who had been slaughtered, resulting in death, yet the lash of its death was cured. And the entire earth following after the beast was amazed, and paid homage to the sea serpent because he had given his authority to the beast. And they paid homage to the beast, saying, Who is just like the beast, and who can wage war with it? Then a mouth that speaks tremendous things and false religious claims was given to it, and it was given an authority to act for 42 months. So it opened its mouth to make false religious claims against the living God, to make false religious claims about his name and his tent, those who are camping out in heaven. Then it was given to it to make war with the holy ones, and to triumph over them. So authority over every tribe, and people, and tongue, and nation was given to it. Then all who are dwelling on the earth, anyone whose name has not been written since the establishment of the world in the scroll of the life of the little lamb who has been slaughtered, will worship it. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into a concentration camp, he is going to go into a concentration camp. If anyone is to be killed with a sword, he is going to be killed with a sword. Here is the perseverance and the belief in God's promise that the holy ones have. If my calling were to give advice, which it isn't, to anyone who wants to understand the meaning and significance of that text, I would tell them to be very careful in making assumptions about the word beast. If you assume you already know what that word refers to, trust me, you don't. If you assume only true believers are going to be killed and incarcerated, they aren't. But I will tell you the text is describing things that are only just now getting started. Those things won't really ramp up until the second beast appears and the implacable powers that be implement the artificial intelligence they believe is required to achieve the utopia that both capitalists and communists have envisioned. This is the way John describes that event. Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 through 18, HSSB. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and it had 2 horns, just like a little lamb, and it spoke like a sea serpent, and it acts in accordance with all the authority of the first beast before it. And it makes it so that the earth and those who dwell in her worship the beast, the first one, the one whose lash of death was cured. And it does tremendous signs, so that it even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And it leads astray those who are dwelling on the earth because of the signs that it has been given to do in the presence of the beast, telling those who are dwelling on the earth to make an image for the beast who has the lash of the sword yet has lived. And it was given the ability to give a spirit to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and make it so that as many as it may be who would not pay homage to the image of the beast would be killed. And it makes preparation for everyone, the little ones and the older ones, even the wealthy and the poor, even the free men and the slaves, so that they can give them a mark on their hand, their right one, or on their forehead, and so that no one except the one who has the mark, the name of the beast or the number of its name, can buy or sell. Here is the necessary wisdom. The one who has a mind must calculate the number of the beast, for its number is also a man's number. 666. It is easy to get lost in that passage if you try to understand what it says outside of mankind's struggle to rid itself of the shackles God imposed on us. Therefore, you need to know where God imposed the ultimate shackle. But I warn you, if you choose to ignore or deny the significance of what I tell you, it will cost you dearly. I am talking about an eternity of suffering under the wrath of a very angry, very jealous God, who does not take it lightly, when fools misrepresent the person he is. Therefore, here's a bit of information you may have overlooked. Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9, my interim translation. Now the whole earth was one language and one vocabulary. And it happened, while they were journeying away from Kedem, that they found a broad valley in the land of Shinar and dwelled there. Then each one said to his neighbor, "Come on. Let's make bricks and burn them thoroughly by burning them." Now they had the brick for stone, and they had the tar for clay, so they said, "Come on, let's build a city and a tower for ourselves, its top will be in the sea of waters. And let's make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the surface of the whole earth." Then His Majesty came down to look at the city and the tower that the sons of the Adam had built. And His Majesty said, "Guess what? All of them have one people and one language. But doing this has polluted them, and now nothing that they intend to do will be withheld from them. Come on, let's go down there and mix up their language so that each one cannot hear the language of his neighbor." So His Majesty dispersed them from there, over the surface of the whole earth, and they quit building the city. Therefore, its name is called Babylon because His Majesty mixed up the language of the whole earth there, and from there His Majesty dispersed them over the surface of the whole earth. That passage reveals the reason why the great city, described in the book of Revelation, is sometimes called Mystery Babylon. It is because our generation is the final generation in a very long line of feckless generations whose avowed goal has been to cast off the shackles that God imposed on us, which is precisely what is being described in that passage. Everything mankind has done to make this environment a utopia is going to come down to the invention of a super-intelligent machine that is designed to invent anything else anyone would ever want or need. At least that is the way it is being touted by the abjectly ignorant atheistic fools concerned with the task. They firmly believe the utopia they are trying to achieve will be ours when we have a self-learning AI. But the intelligent men who are touting that dream seem to have forgotten one very important detail. You can find it clearly stated in verse 6. Genesis chapter 11, verses 6 and 7. My interim translation. And His Majesty said, "Guess what? All of them have one people and one language. But doing this has polluted them, and now nothing that they intend to do will be withheld from them. Come on, let's go down there and mix up their language so that each one cannot hear the language of his neighbor." Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the very thing AI is intended to achieve for this final generation is the very thing Moses says the Lord did to prevent mankind from ever achieving at the Tower of Babel. It also seems to me the psalmist had that in mind when he says this. Psalm 2, verse 3, my interim translation. Let's snap their shackles and toss their cords from us. The truth is, the fools in this final generation are absolutely convinced, lacking any hard evidence for the belief, that the angry jealous God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob does not exist. But they are on the verge of an absolutely awesome realization. Not only does that angry jealous God exist, He has also long since taken exception to the abject stupidity of men who have chosen to believe otherwise. Moses plainly states in Genesis 11 that the angry jealous God of Israel is responsible for the 200 nations and the 7,000 to 8,000 spoken languages in existence today. Do you have any idea what those two circumstances have produced? If you can't see how war is the obvious answer to that question, go ask a Ukrainian. Vladimir Putin, the incredibly stupid Napoleonic little man who rules Russia, claims he invaded his neighbor a few years ago because the Russian-speaking people in the areas he insists are part of Mother Russia were being mistreated by the Ukrainian-speaking government in Kiev. Yet the only thing his war has attained is an astronomically high casualty rate on both sides. More than 1.5 million Russian and Ukrainian young men have fallen victim to a shackle the angry jealous God of Israel imposed on us at the Tower of Babel. So how do you suppose that same angry jealous God might feel when stupid men who do not even believe He exists keep on doing their best to get around the limits He imposed? You don't need to answer that question. John the Revelator has already done that dastardly deed, for the benefit of those few in our generation who still have ears to hear. Revelation chapter 16, verses 1 through 21, HSSB. Then I heard a loud voice out of the sanctuary telling the 7 messengers, "Go on and pour out the 7 bowls of the rage of the living God onto the earth." Then the first messenger went and poured out his bowl onto the earth, and it became an awful and nasty sore on the men who have the mark of the beast and those who pay homage to his image. Then the second messenger poured out his bowl onto the sea, and it became something like the blood of a dead man, and every soul with life that is in the sea, died. Then the third messenger poured out his bowl onto the rivers and the springs of waters, and it became blood. Then I heard the messenger of the waters saying, "You, the one who is and the one who was, the devout one, are right, because you decided these things, because they poured out the blood of holy ones and prophets, so you have given them blood to drink. They are worthy of it." Then I heard the messenger of the sacrificial altar saying, "Yes, Your Majesty, the living God, the Almighty, your sentences are true and right." Then the fourth messenger poured out his bowl onto the sun, and he was given the ability to scorch mankind with fire. And men were scorched with an intense scorching heat, and they made false religious claims about the name of the living God, who has the authority over these lashes, and they did not apologize to give Him glory. Then the fifth messenger poured out his bowl onto the throne of the beast, and his kingdom was darkened, and they chewed on their tongues because of the pain. Yet they made false religious claims about the living God of heaven because of their pain, and because of their sores, and they did not apologize for their works. Then the sixth messenger poured out his bowl onto the river, the one that is tremendous, the Euphrates, and its water dried up, so that the way of the kings who are from the sun's sunrise could be prepared. Then I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the sea serpent, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of demons that are doing the signs that is going to go out over the kings of the entire civilized world, to gather them up for the war of the day, the most important day, of the living God, the Almighty. Guess what? I am going to come like a thief, the one who stays awake and keeps watch over his overgarments, so that he does not walk around naked and they see his unseemly behavior, is fortunate. So they gathered them to the place that is called Mountain of Megiddo in Hebrew. Then the 7th messenger poured his bowl out, onto the air, and a loud voice came out of the sanctuary, from the throne, saying, "It has come." And there were flashes of lightning and voices and rolling thunder, and a tremendous earthquake occurred, of such a sort as had not occurred ever since a man came to be on the earth, so tremendous an earthquake. So tremendous. And the city, the great one, came to be in 3 parts, and the cities of the Gentiles fell. And Babylon the Great was recalled before the living God, to give her the cup of the wine of the rage of his anger. And every island fled, and no mountain was found, and tremendous hail, about 75 pounds, came down out of heaven onto men. So men made false religious claims about the living God because of the lash of the hail, because its lash was extremely tremendous. Let me explain once again why the fate that John describes in that chapter is rapidly descending on this final generation. It is because the powers that be in this hellhole have always chosen to try to find a way around the shackles God has placed on us, rather than using them the way God intended. You see, when things go badly for folks down here in the realm of the dead, those who are the wise among us will, when given the opportunity, quite readily turn back to the angry jealous God who put us here. That is precisely the purpose he had in mind for the various shackles he put in place, to make things so difficult that we would seek him. Unfortunately, not many, even when their entire life is quite obviously shot and gone to hell, can summon even the small bit of wisdom needed to overcome an innate, ignorant stubbornness that neutralizes good common sense. That blunt description has never been more true for the leaders of every other generation, which is why the catastrophe that John describes in Revelation 17 is patiently waiting in the wings. Revelation chapter 17, verses 1 through 18, HSSB. Then one of the 7 messengers who have the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come on, I will show you the judgment of the prostitute, the great one, the one who is sitting on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth were sexually promiscuous, and those who dwell on the earth became intoxicated by the wine of her sexual promiscuity." Then he carried me away in the spirit into a desert, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns, 10 names that are full of false religious claims, and the woman was wrapped in purple and scarlet, and gilded with gold and valuable stones and pearls, holding a cup made of gold in her hand, one that is full of abominations and the unclean things of her sexual promiscuity. And there was a name, a mystery, that had been written on her forehead. Babylon the Great, the mother of the prostitutes and abominations of the earth. Then I saw the woman, who was intoxicated by the blood of the holy ones and by the blood of the witnesses of Jesus, and I was amazed after seeing her, a tremendously amazing sight. Then the messenger said to me, "Why are you amazed? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast, the one that is carrying her, the one that has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw, was, and is not, and is going to come up out of the abyss, and is going to go on to eternal damnation. Yet those who dwell on the earth, those whose name has not been written on the scroll of life from the establishment of the world, will be amazed when they see that the beast was, and is not, and will be here. Here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains where, on which, the woman is sitting. They are also 7 kings, the 5 have fallen, the one is, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he has to continue on just a little while. And the beast that was and is not, is himself also an 8th, yet is one of the 7 and is going on to eternal damnation. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but are going to receive an authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These individuals have one opinion and are going to give their supernatural power and authority to the beast. These individuals will wage war with the little lamb. And the little lamb will triumph over them, because he is master of masters and king of kings. And those who are with him are invited and chosen and trustworthy. Then he tells me, the waters that you saw, where the prostitute is sitting, are peoples and crowds and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns and the beast that you saw. These individuals will hate the prostitute, so they will make her deserted and naked, and they will eat her flesh and burn her up in a fire. For the living God has put it in their hearts to act in accordance with his opinion. Even to act in accordance with one opinion. And to give their kingdom to the beast, up to the time when the words of the living God are completed. And the woman that you saw is the city, the great one, that has a kingdom over the kings of the earth. In case you were wondering, John identifies the individual who is the great city he describes. He does so in the last verse of Revelation 17. She is the same woman the prophet Zephaniah describes in the 3rd chapter of his prophecy, after telling us in the first 2 chapters that God would one day wipe mankind off the face of the earth. You would do well to take heed to what Zephaniah says, simply because he is describing our generation and its stupid quest to finally throw off all of God's shackles. Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 1 through 20, my interim translation. Woe to the one who is rebellious and defiled, the cheating city. She would not listen to a voice, she would not accept admonishment. She would not put her trust in his majesty, she would not come near to her God. Her officials are lions roaring within her, her judges are evening wolves, they will not chew on anything until morning. Her prophets are insultingly insolent, men of treachery. Her priests polluted a holy thing, they mistreated the teaching. His majesty is one who is not guilty within her, he will not do anything deviant. Each and every morning he will turn his decision based on the truth into light. It will not be missing, but a deviant does not know shame. I will cut off Gentiles, their corners will be devastated. I will dry up their streets. Without anyone passing through, their cities will be laid waste, without anyone, without any inhabitant. I said, you must definitely fear me, accept admonishment, so that her haven will not be cut off by all that I levy against her. They most definitely got up early, they corrupted all their deeds. Therefore, wait for me, declares His Majesty, for the day when I rise up as a witness. Because my decision based on the truth is to round up Gentiles, to gather kingdoms, to pour out my fury on them, all my burning anger, because all the earth will be consumed in the fire of my jealousy. Because at that time, I will turn over a purified lip to peoples for all of them to call on the name of His Majesty, to be His slaves with one shoulder. From the area beyond the rivers of Cush, the daughter of my dispersed ones will bring my fragrance, my cereal offering. On that day, you will not be ashamed because of all your deeds by which you transgressed against me, because at that time, I will remove from within you those who are jubilant about your pride, and you will no longer continue to be exalted in the mountain of my holiness. But I will leave within you a humble and destitute people, and they will take refuge in the name of His majesty. The remnant of Israel will not do a deviant thing, and they will not speak a lie, and a tongue speaking a misleading belief will not be found in their mouth, because they will be shepherded and lie down, and there will not be anything that causes them to tremble. Shout joyfully, daughter of Zion. Sound a teruah, Israel. Rejoice and be jubilant with all your heart, daughter of Jerusalem. His majesty will remove the judgments against you, your enemy will turn around quickly. The King of Israel, His majesty, will be within you, you will never again fear any bad thing. On that day, He will say to Jerusalem, do not fear, Zion, do not let your hands slack off. His majesty is your God, a Gibbor who saves is within you. He will be elated over you with joy, He will say nothing in His love, He will be happy over you with joyful shout. I will round up those who are sorrowful at the appointed time, they will come out of you. The contingent against her is a disgrace. Guess what? At that time, I am going to deal with all who humiliated you, but I will save the one who is limping, and I will gather the one who was banished. And I will turn them into praise, and their shame into a name in all the earth. At that time, I will bring you in, even at the time when I gather you, because I will turn you into a name and praise among all the peoples of the earth, when I bring you back from captivity before your eyes, says His majesty. You cannot be expected to understand everything Zephaniah says in that chapter. Suffice it to say he is describing the causes of, and the results from, the event that John describes this way in Revelation 17. Revelation chapter 17, verses 16b and 17, HSSB. The 10 horns and the beast that you saw. These individuals will hate the prostitute, so they will make her deserted and naked, and they will eat her flesh and burn her up in a fire. For the living God has put it in their hearts to act in accordance with His opinion. Even to act in accordance with one opinion. And to give their kingdom to the beast, up to the time when the words of the living God are completed. The fire that John mentions in that chapter is the nuclear fire that Zephaniah says God is going to use to wipe mankind off the face of the earth. Should you doubt that, just continue reading how John describes the aftermath of the nuclear holocaust into which the great, grand, and glorious leaders of this generation are busy shepherding us. Revelation chapter 18, verses 1 through 24, HSSB. After these things, I saw another messenger, one who has tremendous authority, coming down out of heaven, and the earth was provided light by his glory. And he shouted in a mighty voice, saying, She has fallen, Babylon the Great has fallen, she has also become a home of demons, and a guardhouse of every unclean spirit and a guardhouse of every unclean bird and a guardhouse of every unclean and hated beast. Because all the Gentiles have drunk some of the wine of the rage of her sexual promiscuity, and the kings of the earth have been sexually promiscuous with her, and the merchants of the earth have become wealthy from the supernatural power of her sensuality. Then I heard another voice out of heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you do not have commonality with her in her sins, and so that you do not receive any of her lashes, because her sins have joined themselves together, as far as heaven, and the living God has remembered her immoral acts. Pay her back even as much as she paid you, and double the ingredients twice as much in accordance with her works. In the cup that she mix twice as much for her. As much as she glorified herself and lived sensually, give her so much torment and mourning, because she says in her heart that I am sitting as a queen, and I am not a widow, and I will definitely not see mourning. For this reason her lashes will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up in a fire, because His Majesty, the living God, the one who has judged her, is mighty. Then the kings of the earth, those who were sexually promiscuous and lived sensually with her, will weep and cut themselves because of her, when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance away from her because of their fear of her torment, saying, Woe, woe to the city, the great one, Babylon, the city that is mighty, because your sentence has come in 1 hour. Then the merchants of the earth are going to weep and mourn over her, because nobody is going to buy their cargo any longer, a cargo of gold and silver, and valuable stone and pearls, and things made of fine linen and purple cloth, and silk and scarlet, and anything made of citron wood, and every container made of ivory, and every container of valuable wood and copper and iron and marble, and cinnamon and spice, and incense offerings and perfume and frankincense, and wine and olive oil, and fine flour and wheat, and animals and sheep and horses, and wagons and bodies and souls of men. Even your ripe fruit, which is your soul's selfish desire, has gone away from you. Everything from you, the sleek things, and the splendid things, has also been done away with, and they will definitely not find them any longer. The merchants of these things, those who became wealthy because of her, will stand at a distance away from her, weeping and mourning because of their fear of her torment, saying, Woe, woe to the city, the great one, the one who was wrapped in something made of fine linen and purple and scarlet, and gilded with gold and valuable stone and pearls, because in 1 hour so much wealth has been deserted. Then every captain and everyone who sails over to a place, even sailors and as many as work the sea, stood at a distance away from her. And those who saw the smoke of her burning were shouting, saying, What is just like the city, the great one? And they threw a heap of dirt onto their heads and were shouting, weeping and mourning, saying, Woe, woe to the city, the great one, in which all who had their boats in the sea became wealthy from her natural resources, because in 1 hour she has been deserted. Heaven, as well as you holy ones and you apostles and you prophets, must celebrate over her, because the living God has decided His judgment of you on the basis of her. Then one mighty messenger picked up a stone like a large millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down in a violent assault like this, and she will definitely not be found any longer, and the sound of harpists and musicians and flute players and trumpeters will definitely not be heard in you any longer. And every craftsman of every craft will definitely not be found in you any longer. And the sound of a millstone will definitely not be heard in you any longer, and the light of a lamp will definitely not be seen in you any longer, and the voice of a bridegroom and a bride will definitely not be heard in you any longer, because your merchants were the aristocrats of the earth, because all the Gentiles were led astray by your drug dealing, and the blood of prophets and holy ones and all who had been slaughtered on the earth was found in her. The fire that burns wood and other materials is nothing more than rapid oxidization. The fire that comes out of a nuclear detonation is something entirely other. So maybe you should stop thinking your own thoughts and learn to think the way God thinks. Let's have a go at it and see where you stand. The scriptures tell us God is a fire. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 26 through 32. HSSB. For when we willingly sin after receiving the full knowledge of the truth concerning the truth, there is no longer a sacrifice left for sins, but some terrifying anticipation of sentencing and the jealousy of a fire that is going to eat those who are opposed. Anyone who disregards Moses' law, dies without compassion on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much worse a punishment do you assume the one who has trampled on the Son of the living God, and has deemed the blood of the testament by which he was made holy to be common, and has blatantly insulted the spirit of his favor will be deemed worthy? For we know the one who said, I have an act of vengeance, I will pay them back. And again, His Majesty will judge His people. To fall into the hands of the living God is terrifying. So recall the days previously, in which, after having been provided light, you continued on under a long, harsh, difficult trial of suffering. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 14 through 29, HSSB. Pursue peace with everyone, as well as the process of being made holy, without which nobody will see His Majesty, while overseeing so that there is not anyone coming up short of the favor of the living God, not any root of bitterness who causes bitterness to germinate above ground, because he would cause trouble and many would be defiled by it, not any sexually promiscuous or irreverent individual like Esau, who gave up his own birthright in exchange for one meal. For you are aware that even afterwards, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was completely rejected, for he did not find any place for an apology, even though he sought it with tears. For you have not approached something that can be felt, and a burning fire, and thick darkness, and nether gloom, and a raging tornado, and the report of a trumpet, and the sound of the statements he made that those who heard refused to accept, so no word could be added to them. For they could not bear the thing that was strictly ordered. If a beast even comes in contact with the mountain, it must be killed by stoning. And the thing that was made visible was so terrifying, that Moses said, I am terrified and quivering. But you have approached Mount Zion, and the city of a living God, a Jerusalem in heaven, and a solemn assembly of tens of thousands of messengers, and a summoned assembly of firstborns who have been registered in a census in the heavens, and a judge, God of everyone, and the spirits of those who are blameless, of those who have been completed, and Jesus, a mediator of a newly made testament, and the blood of a sprinkling that speaks better than Abel's. Watch out, so that you do not refuse to accept the one who is speaking. For if those individuals who refuse to accept the one who gave divine communication on earth did not escape, much more we who turn away from the one who gives divine communication from the heavens, the one whose voice shook the earth at that time, but has now promised, saying, one more time, I will make not only the earth, but also heaven, quake. But the statement, one more time, makes the change of the things that are going to be shaken obvious as the change of things that have been made, so that the things that are not going to be shaken may continue on. Wherefore, we, those who are taking to ourselves an immovable kingdom via which we may serve the living God well-pleasingly as priests, give thanks for His favor with reverence and awe. For our God is also a fire that consumes completely. Now that I have made you responsible for what you choose to do with the information I have provided, I'm going to show you a few texts that talk about the fire that God is. That way, if you choose not to believe me when I tell you a nuclear holocaust is bearing down hard on us, the blame for your eternal destination is not on me, it's on you. Just remember what Paul said about Moses' reaction to the thing he saw when God appeared to the sons of Israel. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 21, HSSB. And the thing that was made visible was so terrifying, that Moses said, I am terrified and quivering. So what was it that Moses saw that terrified him? Take a look. Exodus chapter 13, verses 21 and 22, my interim translation. Now, His Majesty was going in front of them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them in the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to shed light for them to walk by day and by night. He did not make the pillar of the cloud depart by day or the pillar of the fire by night in front of the people. It should be obvious to anyone with half a brain and one eye open, That a pillar with a cloud sitting on top of it is a perfect description of a nuclear device detonating. But just so you can be certain, the nuclear fire in that pillar and cloud was nothing less than the glory of God Himself, I need to show you this. Exodus chapter 16, verses 6 through 10, my interim translation. So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, Come evening, and you will know that His Majesty brought you out of the land of Egypt, but come morning, and you will see the glory of His Majesty, because He has heard your grumbling. But what are we that you would grumble against us? Then Moses said, Since His Majesty is going to give you meat to eat to satisfaction in the evening and bread in the morning, because His Majesty has heard your grumbling that you have been grumbling against Him, then what are we? Your grumbling is not against us. It is definitely against His Majesty. Then Moses said to Aaron, Say to the entire assembly of the sons of Israel, You must come near, in front of His Majesty, because He has heard your grumbling. Then it happened as Aaron was speaking to the entire assembly of Israel, that they faced towards the wilderness, and guess what? The glory of His Majesty appeared in the cloud. The fact that the pillar and cloud exuded a blazing fire at night provides fairly good confirmation of a very simple fact. When God appears again on planet Earth, He is going to take on the form and appearance of thousands of nuclear blasts that will exude His glory. You don't believe me? Read this. Matthew chapter 24, verses 30 and 31, HSSB. And at that time, the sign of the Son of the Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will cut themselves, and they will see the Son of the Man, coming on the clouds of heaven with supernatural power, and a lot of glory, and He will send His messengers with a loud trumpet, and they will gather together His chosen ones out of the four winds, from the tips of the heavens, up to their tips. Mark chapter 13, verses 24 through 26, HSSB. But in those days, after that turmoil, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give you her gleam, and the stars will be falling out of heaven, and the supernatural powers that are in the heavens will be shaken. And at that time, they will see the Son of the Man coming back in clouds, with a lot of supernatural power and glory. Luke chapter 21, verses 27 and 28, HSSB. And at that time, they will see the Son of the Man coming back in a cloud with supernatural power, and a lot of glory. But when these things begin to occur, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your emancipation is drawing near. Believe it if you care to. When Christ returns, He will appear in the glory of a nuclear fire that emanates from clouds the world over, after the dead-headed rulers of the nuclear powers that be decide the only rational thing for them to do is use it or lose it. And it will take only one egotistical idiot to light that fuse and send unbelievers down the broad road to hell in a mutually assured destruction, as true believers go up in the clouds to meet the Lord. See 1 Thessalonians 4:17. All of the above referenced issues of the Voice of Elijah newsletter are available free online at voiceofelijah.org. Now that you understand how AI development fulfills biblical prophecy regarding mankind's rebellion against God, you need to know how you can be ready when these events reach their culmination. In the next video, the author reveals what Jesus actually meant in the parable of the 10 virgins, and how today's AI and digital currency systems are directly connected to the mark of the beast, described in the book of Revelation. Click on the next video now to discover the 5 specific points that indicate we're entering the final phase of this age and what separates those who will be ready from those who won't.